She banged on my garage door like a maniac, shouting, "Open up right now. HOA rules say you can't park that truck here." I froze for a second, still holding the wrench in my hand. It was Saturday morning. I'd just changed my truck's oil inside my own garage. Through the small window, I saw her, Karen, the self-proclaimed neighborhood compliance officer, waving a clipboard like it was a badge. Two men in orange vests stood behind her with a tow truck idling on my driveway. My heart dropped. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I said, opening the side door. Karen turned, smirking like she'd won a war. "We're towing this vehicle. HOA regulations don't allow non-standard vehicles in residential garages. You've been warned." Warned. That was the first I'd heard of it. "That's my private garage," I said, trying to stay calm. "You step 1 foot inside, and it's trespassing." She tilted her sunglasses down, glaring. "Sweetheart, I am the HOA. You don't tell me what's trespassing." That's when I noticed her hand signaling to the tow guys. They started reversing closer, the hook rattling like a death bell. My wife peeked through the curtain, whispering, "Please don't start something, we can't afford another fight." But I wasn't about to let anyone touch my truck. That Ford wasn't just metal, it was my late dad's. The same truck we rebuilt together before he passed. So I stepped forward and slammed the garage door button. It rolled down fast, locking with a hard click before the tow cable could latch. Karen's face twisted in disbelief. "Did you just lock me out?" she shouted. "No," I said, staring straight at her through the small glass panel. "I locked you out of my property." She grabbed her phone instantly. "Fine, I'm calling the sheriff. Let's see who's breaking the law now." I smiled slightly. "Yeah," I said, pulling out my own phone. "Let's." Because what she didn't know was that the sheriff she was about to call, he was my older brother. "You don't mess with a man's garage in America," I muttered, dialing the number myself. Karen paced up and down my driveway like she owned the whole street. The tow guys leaned against their truck, looking uncomfortable now that the garage door was sealed tight. One of them whispered, "Ma'am, maybe we should wait for actual confirmation before towing anything." But she snapped, "Do what I said. I'm head of this HOA, and that's all the confirmation you need." Inside the garage, I could still hear her voice echoing through the metal door. My wife stood beside me, nervous. "What if the sheriff really comes?" she asked softly. I looked at her and said, "Oh, he's coming. Just, not for me." 5 minutes later, a county patrol car pulled up with its lights flashing. Karen straightened her back and strutted toward it like she was welcoming a VIP guest. "Officer, thank God you're here," she said. "This man's been violating HOA parking codes and locked me out when I tried to enforce them." The car door opened slowly, and my brother stepped out. Sheriff Mark Hayes. Built like a wall, calm eyes, and that same steady presence he'd always had since our dad's days in service. Karen froze for half a second when she saw his badge, but then forced a fake smile. "Oh, wonderful. Finally, someone who'll listen to reason." Mark glanced at her clipboard, then at me through the small garage window. He gave me a quick nod, the kind only brothers could read. I lifted the door just enough to speak. "Morning, Sheriff," I said, trying not to laugh. Karen crossed her arms. "Don't get smart with me. He's parking a non-residential vehicle in a restricted area." Mark looked around. "Restricted by who?" "By me. I mean, by the HOA." She barked. Mark stepped closer. "Ma'am, this is a private property. Garage. HOA rules don't override county property laws. Did you issue an official notice?" Karen blinked. "Well, not exactly official, but..." He raised a brow. "You wrote it yourself, didn't you?" Her silence was enough. My wife stepped out, recording everything on her phone. The tow guys quietly started backing their truck away, pretending they'd never been there. Karen's face turned red. "This isn't over. I'll get the HOA board to remove this entire truck by force if I have to." Mark looked her dead in the eyes and said, "If you step on this property again without a court order, you will be the one removed by force." "Understood." She froze, her mouth opening and closing like she'd swallowed her words. As she stomped off toward her house, Mark looked at me and smirked. "You always did know how to find trouble, little brother." I laughed. "Yeah, but this time, trouble came looking for me." He started to leave, but before he reached his car, Karen shouted from down the street, "We'll see who owns that land when I pull the records." I felt a chill run down my spine. She wasn't bluffing this time. Because I had a secret I hadn't told even my brother, something buried deep in those records that could change everything. And if Karen found it, she'd destroy me with it. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house made me think Karen was outside again. My wife kept pacing near the window, peeking through the blinds. What if she actually finds something in those records? She whispered. You said this land used to belong to the old township, what if she... I handled all that years ago, I said, though my voice didn't sound convincing, even to myself. I grabbed my old file box from the closet and opened it on the kitchen table. Inside were documents, dusty and yellowed, property deeds, ownership transfers, and one paper I'd hoped I'd never have to show anyone. It wasn't a fake document, but it wasn't exactly complete either. The next morning, just as the sun started cutting through the fog, a loud bang hit my front door. I opened it, and there she was again, Karen, with two men in suits and a smug grin. Morning, she said sweetly. Turns out, this little garage you're so protective of. It's built 6 feet over HOA jurisdiction land. Meaning, it's ours. I stared at her, trying to process the words. That's impossible, I said. She waved a paper in my face. Surveyor's map. Straight from the county office. I told you I'd find it. My wife's voice trembled from behind me. This is harassment. Karen leaned closer, lowering her voice. You lock me out again, I'll file for an immediate seizure order. That truck will be mine before the week ends. That's when something in me snapped. Not anger, but a kind of cold calm I hadn't felt in years. I looked straight at her and said, you just made a very big mistake. She laughed. Oh yeah, you gonna call your brother again? I stepped back inside and returned with a folder. No, I said. I'm going to call my lawyer. The smirk faded from her face as I laid a thick set of papers on the porch railing. See this, I said, tapping the top document. This garage, this land, was transferred under the Federal Property Protection Act after my dad's service. Which means it's under veteran exemption. You can't touch it. Not even the law. The two men in suits looked at each other nervously. Karen, this changes things, one of them murmured. But she wasn't done. You're bluffing, she hissed. I'll verify every word. I smiled slightly. Please do. And when you do, make sure to check who signed that exemption. She snatched the papers and stormed off. My wife closed the door slowly, whispering, who did sign it? I sat down, staring at the floor. Dad didn't just own this land, I said quietly. He built it for a government project during his service. The exemption wasn't signed by him. I looked up at her. It was signed by the Secretary of Defense. My wife covered her mouth, eyes wide. Oh my God, if she finds that, she'll think she can expose me, I said, my tone sharpening. But what she doesn't know is that by digging into that file, she's walking straight into a federal investigation. Outside, the street was silent again. But I could see her curtains move from across the road. She was watching. And I knew, Karen wasn't going to stop. Not until one of us was ruined. 2 days later, everything exploded. I woke up to flashing lights and camera crews outside my house. Karen stood on the sidewalk with a microphone in her hand, pretending to cry. We just want justice, she told the local news reporter. This man's garage was built on stolen federal land. He's hiding military documents and claiming false ownership. My stomach dropped. She'd done it, she'd taken it to the media. My wife pulled the curtain back, her voice shaking. She called the news. Not just the news, I said, noticing the black SUV parked behind the cameras. She called them federal agents. They approached the house with calm, deliberate steps. One of them held a folder, the same kind I'd seen 100 times during my own years in the service. Mr. Hayes, he said, we received a report about potential classified materials stored on private property. We'd like to take a look. Karen smirked from behind them, whispering to a cameraman, he's done for. HOA doesn't tolerate criminals. My heart was pounding, but I didn't move. You have a warrant? I asked. Yes, sir, the agent replied, handing it to me. Everything looked legitimate. I knew I couldn't stop them. So I stepped aside. Go ahead, I said. They entered the garage while Karen stayed outside, holding her little audience together with fake concern. See, she told the camera. When people like him break the law, someone has to take charge. But then, the silence broke. One of the agents came out, holding a dusty box with the U.S. Defense seal. "Sir," he said to me quietly, "this box contains sealed communications from the 2003 federal engineering project in Arlington. You weren't supposed to have this." Karen's eyes lit up like fireworks. "I knew it," she shouted. "He's hiding government property." But the agent didn't even look at her. "Ma'am, you're the one who reported this, correct?" "Yes," she said proudly. "Then we'll need you to come with us." Her face fell. What? Why?" "Because the files you accessed were restricted under federal code. You used unauthorized credentials to obtain them. That's a felony." The entire crowd went silent. Even the cameraman lowered his lens. Karen stammered, No, I just wanted to." But the agent was already reading her rights. She tried to pull away, shouting, "You can't do this. I'm the HOA president." Mark's patrol car pulled up just then. He stepped out, crossed his arms, and said, "Ma'am, you're under arrest for impersonating an officer, trespassing, and filing a false federal report. You might wanna sit this one out." She screamed as they led her into the black SUV, her voice echoing through the street. When the vehicles left, the cameras were still rolling, but this time, they turned to me. The reporter hesitated, then asked softly, "Sir, what was really in that garage?" I looked straight into the camera and said, "Just my father's truck. And a box of memories that didn't deserve to be turned into a headline." My wife held my hand, her eyes filled with relief and tears. Mark put his hand on my shoulder and said, "You handled that like Dad would've." I took a deep breath, looking out at the empty street. I didn't fight for this country to be told I can't park in my own garage. The reporter nodded slowly, turning off the mic. "That line," she said, "is going to go viral." And it did. By nightfall, the whole neighborhood knew the truth. The HOA board voted to remove Karen permanently. But as I stood in the quiet driveway, looking at the stars, one thought kept running through my mind. For people like her, power isn't the problem. It's what they think it gives them the right to do. And this time, power lost. End.